And by 1914, they had amassed a sufficient amount of wealth in Europe to be able to finance a big war. You know, financing a big war and really making money means you must pay both sides. You have to finance both sides of the war. And so they closed down Kimberley in the summer of 1914. And they started the First World War in the summer of 1914, which led to the demise of Britain as a superpower, but gave them the Holy Land. Between the First World War and the Second World War, we saw the evidence accumulating that Britain was going down. And the last nail in the coffin was in 1956. Egypt, keep quiet now. 1956. What happened in 1956? Yes. Jamal Abdel Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal. And then Britain, France, and Israel retaliated by sending their troops and reoccupying the canal. A general in Washington surprised the world, a man named Dwight Eisenhower. He didn't surprise the world because he was morally indignant about what they had done, and he supported the just cause of the Arabs, and blah, 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 as they say in Cape Town. No! He ordered Britain to withdraw, and ordered France to withdraw. Why? Because a day like a year has come to an end, and a day like a month has now begun. That's why you have to withdraw. And so Britain the British lion had to put its tail between its legs and withdraw. And the British Prime Minister, whose name was Churchill. You're guessing, that's a PhD in guessing. The British Prime Minister was?
My God.
Anthony Eden. Had to resign. The British government fell. In 1963, another event took place, which was to demonstrate to the world that a new ruling state has emerged. The evidence, of course, was already there before 1963, but in 1963 we had to confirm to the world in a very dramatic way. We are the rulers of the world. What happened in 1963? The Cuban Missile Crisis. That Khrushchev, this Russian premier, was placing nuclear missiles on Cuban territory in retaliation for NATO placing nuclear missiles in Turkish territory, threatening Europe. So John Kennedy imposed unilaterally what he called the quarantine, which had no justification in international law, around Cuba. And the Cuban ships which were coming on the way would now have to decide whether they're going to bust the quarantine and the world will now be engulfed in nuclear warfare, or whether there could be a resolution to the problem. The problem was resolved, yes. The ships turned back and went back home, and the missiles were removed from Cuba. And the world said, whoa, wow, this is really great. Uncle Sam rules the world now. What they didn't tell us was that the United States had made a deal with Russia. If you remove your missiles from Cuba, we will remove our missiles from Turkey. And since that deal was struck, they cannot attack Cuba. So Fidel Castro is still there, very comfortable in Cuba because of that deal of 1963. The United States now replaces Britain as the new ruling state in the world. And when Britain, as the ruling state, ruled the seas, every single important naval port on the face of the earth was under British control. Now the donkey takes over. The flying donkey takes over. And the United States imposes or places US bases, which have, of course, a Navy complement, but aircraft carriers, an Air Force. And they're scattered all over the world. I don't know whether there's a US base in South Africa.
Diego Garcia.
No, Botswana.
Botswana. There was one in Libya. And Jamal Abdel Nasser should have known about it. There was one in Libya.
Naval base in Botswana?
And in 1967, when the Egyptian Air Force was expecting the attack to come from the east, it never came from the east. It came from the west. Because the aircraft took off from the Wheeler Air Force Base, the American Air Force Base in Libya, and destroyed the entire Egyptian Air Force on the ground at the beginning of the war. The United States takes over as a new ruling state in the world and controls the air. Controls the air. In addition to the sea, the air. And American troops are all over the world, all over the world. But the United States does not depend on military power alone to rule the world. The United States takes over from Britain as the financial capital of the world. And the banking system reaches its zenith at this time. And the United States becomes the money lender of the world, with Europe behind it and Britain behind it. And the British sterling pound is replaced by the US dollar as the new international currency. And this is your homework now. You have to go back home and go and check out and find the Bretton Woods Conference of 1944 in upstate New York, at a place called Bretton Woods. And you've got to read the proceedings of the conference. You come across the name John Maynard Keynes. They don't teach this in the Darul Uloom. And you'll come across the name White, I think it was Richard White or something like that, the American delegate. And the debates that were taking place in that conference, and the decision what to do with the world of paper money. We have successfully driven the gold dinar and silver dirham out of the market. We have done it already during the process of colonization. We have introduced the paper during the process of colonization, and we are now ready to decolonize. This is 1944. Pakistan has not yet come into being. India has not yet come into being. But before we start handing out these bits of paper called independence and then ruling them by proxy, we have to put institutions in place. And so from that Bretton Woods conference, which we had to study as students, emerged a plan for only one currency to have link with gold, the US dollar. It would still be redeemable in gold, so we can throw some dust in their eyes. And the US dollar would be redeemable at the rate of 35 US dollars to 1 ounce of gold. But only one currency can be redeemed for gold. All the rest of the paper currencies of the world, all the rest of them, will have value only in relation to the US dollar. A first-year student in Darul Uloom, he doesn't have to become a mufti, would look at that and say, this is 99% haram. Huh? 99% haram. And this is 1944. Where were the scholars of Islam in 1944? And then secondly, they said, yes, this one currency will still have redeemability, meaning you could bring the paper and get the gold at the rate of 35 for 1 ounce of gold. But only governments can do that. Only central banks can do that. The people who are using the money for buying and selling, they can't do it. So the first year student in the Darul Uloom will now say this is 99.99% haram. That's the first year student. So where are his teachers? Where are the muftis? 1944. And where have they been since 1944? So the United States starts off with an advantage, a tremendous advantage, built into the Bretton Woods Accord. And so the International Monetary Fund is created. And in the Articles of Agreement of the International Monetary Fund, there is an article that Dr. Muhammad Mahathir was not aware of, the Prime Minister of Malaysia. That the International Monetary Fund Articles of Agreement prohibit the use of gold as money. Yeah. That includes the gold dinar. That's Sunnah money. Where were the scholars of Islam? In 1945, when the International Monetary Fund emerged, where were they? And where have they been since then? In 1971, Charles de Gaulle, who was not a particularly good friend of America. Of course, they were very pleased when John Kennedy was married to a French girl, Jacqueline de Beauvoir, became Jacqueline Kennedy. So you have a French girl in the White House. Yeah. But Charles de Gaulle could see that this system was unfair, and he was a French nationalist, and he felt it was unfair to France. And when he saw the United States printing and printing and printing paper to finance the Vietnam War in the late 60s, in September of 1971, Charles de Gaulle did something dramatic. And with that, the game was over. He knocked on the door of Washington. He says, "Hello, are you there?" So they opened the door. He says, "I'm Charles de Gaulle, and I'm not just a simple person in the market, I'm a government. I'm a central bank. And I have with me in my pocket 3 billion US paperbacks, greenbacks, US dollars, and I want the gold. Could you kindly give me the gold?" The game was up.